This is the Moshpit Backstage podcast for punk, metal and rock interviews and segments.
Hi, this is Andrew from Harlott, and you're listening to the Moshpit on Spin.
Andrew Hudson is the guitarist and vocal of Melbourne thrash metal band Harlott, who have released their third album, Extinction. They'll be launching the album in a show with Desecrator at the Bendigo Hotel on April 29th. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, last time we talked, you were re-releasing Proliferation on Nuclear Blast after you recorded it independently. This time, recording on a label. Any differences?
We had a budget.
Nice.
Which was just an absolute novelty for me, because for the first time in my life, being in a band didn't cost me everything I had, which is a huge program. They were pretty laid back creatively. We just kind of, we recorded pretty much the entire album before they heard it. Knowing full well that they could either listen to it and go, yeah, that's great, or they could hear it and go, no, not interested, and drop us. They didn't send over producers or anything like that. They didn't ask for too many studio updates or creative control.
That's good.
They just let us do our thing, and then gave us some money for the pleasure.
Did you feel any pressure with that? Like this being your first kind of, hey, there's actually someone ultimately who's kind of paying you to do this?
If anything, I felt a little bit less pressure on that level, just because of the extra money we had towards it. We could take a bit more time in the studio and actually make sure we were doing things the way we wanted to do it. Like our budget for the album, like we spent like a good 50% more on this record than we did on the first two, and that was because we could afford to do that, because we had funding coming from somewhere else. The real pressure I felt was the fact that it was the third album, which is usually the make or break record for at least this kind of genre. There's a lot of thrash bands that kind of they do one really solid album and then immediately they kind of prematurely go hard rock. Like you'll notice that all the big four bands, they do four good albums. We'll do four incredible thrash metal albums.
Yeah.
And then we'll get really tired and play some easy stuff, because I'm sick of doing that every night for an entire year.
Yeah.
Some people think they can get away with that a little bit early.
The press release mentions Teutonic, melody and grit, which I really felt throughout, and it was I love to hear that, because I'm very much a big fan of the German thrash metal bands. So, what brought those influences to the surface with this album?
Almost entirely creative.
Yeah.
I love that band. I get weird looks for this, but Cause for Conflict is like a major inspiration to me writing-wise, just because it's honestly some of the best, like the cleverest writing Millet's ever done. Like the first couple of albums were just angry and fast. The later stuff, he's got this. He admits that he needs to employ the cheese police for a lot of what he does, and I honestly think he needs to pay them a bit more because of some of the stuff he gets away with on those albums. But there was this experimental period in the 90s again when some bands went rock. He went, I'm going to do some bloody weird shit, and he did some electronica metal, and there's some records that we shouldn't mention. But Cause for Conflict is incredible. It is genius from start to finish, and that album, listening to that, it's bad to say this, but you definitely listen to that CD and go, oh, I'm going to steal that. Or I'm going to be using something like that, because that just sounds incredible.
Yeah, the thing, that's the thing with thrash metal. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is in a lot of music, you've got to be careful that you're not seen as copying someone else's style.
Yeah.
But in I think thrash metal especially, but in a lot of metal, that's kind of that's how entire genres have solidified. Is that one band played something interesting or slightly different, and all the bands thought, "Oh my god, that's so amazing!" And then they changed their style to mimic that other band. It's this weird thing where if you actually copy someone, it's an incredibly bad thing. But because you're playing in their style out of love, it's not something that's looked down upon at all in metal.
I find there's some people that love it. Like, you know, obviously because I'm an egotistical megalomaniac, I go on all of our YouTube clips and I troll through the comments, and you'll see 9 good comments and then 1 bad one. And I'll focus on the negative because that's the kind of person I am. But there'll be 9 comments, and 9 of them will say, yeah, this sounds exactly like Slayer. And then 1 comment that says, this sounds exactly like Slayer. That sucks. And it's, you know, some people are okay with it, some people aren't. I find it weird that a band could release, 15 CDs that all sound the same, and someone would be like, what an incredibly consistent band. How amazing is that? But if you release one album that sounds similar to any of those other 15, everyone's like, you're a monster. How dare you do that? How dare you sing the way that you sing and have the voice that you have?
Yeah, it's funny like that. In terms of the album, like, there's a couple of questions about song length, which I just focused on for some reason. Now, there's two of the longest songs to date on that album. The first one, Extinction, which is nearly 6 minutes, and Darkness.
That's all intro, though. It's the same with the other one.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a good 30 to 45 seconds of intro. That's smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, that's true. And Darkness Brings the Light, which is over 7 minutes. To be fair, it's over 7 minutes. So you put a little. It doesn't
feel like a 7-minute song, though.
I will agree.
I feel like when you listen to that, you don't sit there and go, "Geez, this song is going on."
I will agree with that, but what happened with that song? Because it's it's a bit out of the normal spectrum of the songs that you write. How did it get so long?
I hadn't done everything that I needed to do, and in 4 minutes, so I kept going until it hit 7. I knew very much what I wanted to achieve with that track, and I finished it, and I listened back and went, "Ooh, that's lengthy. That's got some. That's a bit long in the tooth, that one." It just happens. They come together in that way. I couldn't have cut anything out of that because then it wouldn't have made sense to me. I'm very stubborn with my own music, which can be difficult to work with when you have other people with creative inputs and they go, "How about this?" And I go, "Well, that would work, but that's not how I hear it." So, yeah.
Now, in terms of the short songs, you kind of have like 1 or 2 short songs an album, and they're just blisteringly fast and just really...
Every song's got a minute 30 song. Every album's got a minute 30.
Yeah,
song.
Exactly. What happens with those? Do you go, I need to make a really fast song, or does the song just
much like with the longer ones? In 1 minute and 30 seconds, I've done everything I needed to do in the song. I go, yep, everything's there.
That's right.
The template, I've got a tick in all of the boxes on my little song template. I go, wrap her up, she's done, stick a fork in it.
In terms of the lyrical side of the album, what did you draw upon? Was anything related to the current, and I know...
SBS World News.
Yeah. So were you drawing upon the state of the world in any sense?
All of the albums have pretty much been... the first one dabbled in religion a little bit, but, religion's just the symptom of a greater issue, which is humanity. As much, all of the things are war and famine and all those, just an inability to exist as a peaceful species. I don't have a lot of hope for mankind. I don't see a lot of good happening, and I don't see the good that I do see happening in the right places. I think the people in power don't care that much about making the world a better place because there's too much profit to be made from doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And that is what I write about. Also, the human mind is an incredible piece of equipment. It's very flawed. They often don't work in quite the way that I would suggest they're supposed to, from a biological point of view. But there's a lot to write about just within how people work as individuals.
When Trump was elected, there was kind of a lot of talk, specifically about...
How exciting was that, by the way? As a nihilist, you see that happen and you go, good. I'm done with living anyway. I'm ready. Bring it on.
I'm a big fan of American politics in the sense that it's just fascinating to watch. And I was watching the coverage from about 2 a.m. and everyone expected Hillary to win, and it sort of just turned. And it was for me, it was just horrifying to watch that. It's just
it was horrifying to realise that that's how far gone that country is.
Yeah.
To realise that things are obviously a lot worse in America, and like he didn't get elected in by a majority vote. He still only got like 24 point something % of the vote, but that was still a quarter of the nation was that disenfranchised with how the government worked, and like that upset with how things were going, that they went, yep, let's vote in the wild card. It's just it was fascinating to realize that that's how far gone they were, and that was news to us because we knew that Trump existed. We knew, we saw all of his speeches, and we saw all of his rallies where he had his redneck people that just wanted to hit anyone of color and say these horrible things all the time. But we didn't realize how significant that support was, because that's what they didn't show us.
But my thoughts is, like, they talk a lot about late night comedians won't be able to make any more jokes because how do you make a joke about it?
They've got material for days.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's turned out to be. But in terms
Jon
of
Stewart must have wanted to come out of retirement for that one.
I think he might soon. In terms of this sort of situation, how do you think this kind of affects people of your mindset, my mindset, similar mindsets in terms of our approach to, ideas about the world and writing lyrics and all that stuff? How do you think that's going to be a source of inspiration? Like, do you think it makes it harder because the world's just nuts and just crazy and just doesn't make any sense in a lot of ways? Or do you think it makes it easier because the kind of conflicts, violence, all that sort of stuff is in your face, and so you can draw upon it that much more easily?
Well, it's definitely inherent in society as a whole, and I think the worse things get, potentially the better it's going to be for people doing what we do, because if my lyrics are always going to be about that kind of thing, but if they can connect with a larger audience because of how the world is, then obviously that's more money in my pocket. Which is a horrible way to think about it, But, I've got to make the best of a bad situation.
The artwork for this album shares kind of a lot of common with Proliferation, the kind of view of the dying world.
Did you notice that it's a big circle as well?
Yeah, exactly.
I got 3 albums with circles on the front, and they're called Origin, Proliferation, and Extinction.
Yeah, I think...
Because I'm all about the trilogy.
I'm not sure we're going to go after this one, to be honest. You might have screwed yourself.
To the Barbados to retire.
How did this artwork come together? Like, were you sort of saying, I want this, I want that? Was it the artist's work? How did it all come?
I have no idea. I'm really bad. My creativity stops at music and lyrics. I can't go any further than that. I have terrible ideas visually. So I send song titles and some lyrics to Andrei Bushkov, which is an expat Russian living in, I want to say San Francisco or California. He does all the municipal waste, toxic Holocaust artwork. He did the Proliferation artwork as well. I just send him, look, here's what the songs are about, and let me know what you come up with. And then he sends me back drafts. And, he sent me back a hand cracking open the earth with, oil leaking into barrels, and it was orange and green and blue. And I thought, well, that's just so cliched and so disgustingly thrash that I have to take it.
Yeah.
No one's going to pick up that CD and think it is anything else other than what it is.
I noticed also the continuation of the atomic ring, which is a nice touch.
How good is that? The Manhattan Project symbol.
Exactly. It's a great touch.
That was my one input. That was my one.
Because you sort of got you've got on Proliferation, him clutching the money, the missiles, and him just rending the world with his bare hand. Yeah.
Just bleeding it dry, cracking it open for a profit. Yes, good times.
You've got a new guitar.
I also made him rotate the globe so that Australia was on the front.
I love that as well, because you just don't see it, because it's always North America. It's always North America.
We got back from a European tour, and if there's one thing we need to ham up, it's the fact that we're Australian, because for some reason that sells.
Oh, cool. That's good to hear.
I think it's just because we're not American.
Yeah, especially in this day. Well, the last, 50 years, I guess.
Yeah, they don't like Americans, do they?
No, especially
regardless of what the Americans think. They're not a popular people.
You've got a new guitarist, Jake. How's he going?
He's good. He's a riff machine.
Yeah, excellent.
He's a good bloke. He's got his head screwed on straight, and he's very chill there. And he's been through all of the motions with his own bands, so he knows exactly what he wants to do. And he's very, very happy with the thought that he's going to be able to do what he wants with this band.
Oh, cool.
Which, suits us. We're happy to take him along for the ride and have a mutually beneficial relationship with the guy.
Now, I think last time we talked, you were going on your first international tour with Unrivaled. How did that go?
That's the one. Oh, mate. What a time that was. How do I even describe that? It was the hardest and best 6 weeks of my life. I have never felt such highs, and I have never plummeted to such lows. There is nothing worse than trying to do an interview with a gorgeous young French lady after 4 days of not sleeping or showering and having to hold her at arm's length and apologize profusely for the odor. Look, it was amazing to see Europe in that way. It was a lot of time on a bus, driving down highways, but it was, every day you'd wake up in a new city and get to meet new people and try out some new customs and drink horrendous coffee. It's all right, though, because we started in England, so the food just got better as the tour went on. It started at the lowest point with, cod and chips. And then we went to, Paris and just ate bread and cheese. But yeah, it was a good time. The crowds were really responsive. We sold a ton of CDs, which I guess was the idea from a business point of view. And I have several enjoyable memories, none of which I can repeat in polite company.
Now, you got the show, as I mentioned, April 29th with Desecrator.
Yes.
Do you have any upcoming tour plans? Is anything in the works?
Well, other than pulling every string I can to get those creator shows, we've got some Australia dates later in the year, which we're going to announce shortly after the launch, once we've crossed a few T's and dotted some lowercase J's. And we've got Legions of Steel in May, and then we've just announced 2 shows with Alkira in June. We're going to Ballarat, which is always fun. Ballarat in June, that'll be nice and warm. And the night after that, we're doing Melbourne. But yeah, throughout July and August, we're going to be doing all the major cities in Australia, all the ones that we can manage to get to.
Nice.
And we did just get an offer to do some festival stuff early next year, so hopefully something pans out then. And if not, we're aiming for Europe late this year.
Oh, cool.
It's all happening. Busy times.
I think the band's over 10 years old now. Do you have any thoughts about, time has passed? That's a long time to be involved in a singular enterprise.
It's a long time to be doing anything, really. Which, don't repeat that to married people. It's not the mentality that they live by. But, when I'm 27 now. So, when I started this...
Don't say how young you are, because then you make me feel because I haven't toured internationally, and I'm 24.
Yeah, well, you'll get there. You'll get there.
I'm sure. It's just around the corner.
One day, you too will get the experience to throw money at a problem and hope that it makes you happy. Which is, again, don't say that to married people. When I started the band, I was a child, effectively, and it did take me a very long time to actually work out what we were going to do. And I really don't think about this band having done anything until we released, None in 2012, which, still good 5 years ago. But I would like to say that we've got a reasonably consistent release rate. We're up to album 3, and that's one every 2 years for the last 6 years, which is... Wait, the maths is wrong. Yeah, we did album 1, 2013, album 2, 2015, and we just did album 3. Yeah. So, I like to keep myself busy, but you can't really can't go any better than that when we all need to work full-time to afford to do what we're doing. Probably should be a lot better for how long we've been at it. I barely know how to play guitar.
Well, it doesn't show. No one's noticed yet, I don't think. So.
Yeah, well, the gain is your friend, man.
3 last questions, kind of about you and your experience with growing up and music and stuff. How did you first get into music?
Apparently I was always that way inclined, according to the parents. And we had a lot of, we were a very working class family, so our holidays were like, 4-hour car ride to Bright, where we'd stay in a caravan for 2 nights and then head home. And those road trips involved a lot of Jethro Tull and a lot of Meatloaf and a lot of John Farnham. And you can get a little bit heavy, some of that music. And when I was about 6 or 7, my brother, who is 7 years older than me, got the recently released Reload album. And that was my introduction to Metallica when I was 6 or 7. And it all just went downhill from there. You listen to Metallica, and then after a while you discover Megadeth, then you discover Slayer, and then you listen to Slayer for long enough that the solos are no longer terrible, and that's when you know you're in trouble.
It's interesting because we talk about the 90s style and the hard rock. How did you kind of work your way back from that kind of post-metal phase of Metallica into what most people would properly call metal? Because if you listen to Metallica's first 4 albums and then, the Load and Reload album and consider them to be the same band at all, I think you're making a mistake. And if you can't listen to Load and Reload for what they are, which is like almost flawless hard rock albums, right, with some of the best production qualities that has ever existed on any music recording ever, you need to be able to appreciate them for what they are. And they are heavy at points, but they are mostly about the groove and the sweet melodies. And then you can listen to the old Metallica and be like, this is fast and this is heavy and this is hard, but then you can hear, that the same people were responsible for creating this music as was responsible for making the other stuff, because there are those signature feels to a lot of the stuff they do. But you do really need to appreciate them as separate entities, as, 80s Metallica and then 90s Metallica, and then just completely write off 2000s and above Metallica. Let's not even go there. That's fair enough. Last question. When did you first pick up the guitar and start singing?
Start singing. Oh, all right. My advice to anyone, and this is what I always say, when I was about 17, the way I learned how to play guitar and sing at the same time, it was Megadeth's Rust in Peace. Because those riffs are ridiculous, and the vocal lines don't make too much sense to the riff. So if you can get those to work together in your head, you can do anything.
Harlott's third album, Extinction, is out now, and they'll be playing at the Bendigo Hotel. With Desecrator on April 29th.
Doing great.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Have a good night.
Thanks for listening to the Moshpit Backstage podcast. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and Omni. To find out more about the show, go to www.syn.org.au/moshpit. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/moshpitonsin and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at moshpitsin. The regular Moshpit radio show broadcasts punk, rock and metal tunes and interviews every Thursday nights on SYN 90.7 on FM and digital radios. Listeners outside of Melbourne, Australia can stream SYN 9.7 online at www.syn.org.au. Thanks to Vintage Ruin for the music.
Hi, this is Tommaso from Flash Gun Apocalypse.
Hi, I'm Enid from Girls School.
I am Phoebe Pinnock from Heavenly Axe.
Hey, this is Gary Oldmead of the Misfits.
Hey, this is Kat Sproul from Horizon's Edge, and you're listening to the Moshpit on SYN FM.
Hi, this is Einar from Leopard.
Hi, I'm Virginia Lilly from the band Lily.
This is Raul from 1349.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ali from Uberhead.
Hey, everybody, this is Charlie Benante with Anthrax, and you are listening to the Moshpit on SYN.